Zoning policies determine how our cities are built. It really determines who gets to live in our communities, and it determines how we interact and how we connect with each other. It does this at a very high level, but still paying attention to how we design communities will determine what we look like and how we interact and how we connect with each other in the future. Starting in the 1940s, we really designed neighborhoods to create economic segregation and really racial segregation in our communities. And now, 60, 70 years later, we've been able to legally remove the racial discrimination, but the design of our neighborhoods has still perpetuated these outcomes. We need to look at our zoning to say, how do we undo the racism that was embedded within our city if we're going to create a city that undoes racism?
This is a video about zoning, specifically the use of zoning to increase housing supply in Grand Rapids. That said, this video is also about race, income, markets, public policy, and neighborhoods. Grand Rapids is a city in tension. We're feeling the effects of past policies while navigating current economic pressures. Housing affordability is affected by many levers: supply and demand, public policy, zoning, access to mortgages and wages, and more. Some of these levers are easier to pull than others. The City of Grand Rapids has created a number of amendments focused on zoning rules and process changes that can increase housing supply as part of its Housing Now initiative. This August, the city wants your feedback on these changes. Hopefully, this video will help you understand how we got here and the current market forces. As residents, it's important to know how these things have worked together for good and for bad in the past, so we can make the best possible plan for the future of our neighborhoods.
We are living in the midst of the consequences of policy and funding decisions that go back decades.
Federal housing policy early on began to set up redlining. Redlining affected not just the kind of migrants coming from the Deep South, but even people who had college education and beyond.
Redlining is the systematic denial of resources for certain communities and neighborhoods based largely on race.
So you got $500 in the bank and you need say back then $3,000 loan for your roof to repair your roof or pull a whole new roof off. You weren't getting it. This community, this neighborhood, and neighborhoods to the east were all being starved out. Race is a part of the American culture, and it gets reinforced in different eras in different ways.
In 1991, 8% of mortgage loans in Grand Rapids were given to people who were living in the city center, meaning that 92% of these mortgage loans were actually being approved for people who were living in the suburbs.
From 2012 to the present time right now, there's been an unparalleled growth in the housing market.
What we're seeing is when we used to worry about neighborhoods not having anybody live in them or worried about demolition of blocks, we're now looking at places where people can't find to live.
Homes that in neighborhoods like the Baxter neighborhood that in 2012 people were buying a house for $25,000, that same house might be rented right now for $18,000 to $20,000 a year.
Those same pressures that finance the move to the suburbs are re-emerging as more and more people are moving back into cities. This brings us to Housing Now. In short, this is a series of amendments focused on building more housing types in Grand Rapids and increasing density. They are not about affordable housing specifically. They are about making the construction of new housing types more affordable and in turn increasing the supply.
So if you have a very restricted housing market and you're not building new housing units, the prices will continue to go up. If you can provide more housing supply, it tends to stabilize the housing prices because there's more choice.
The most important thing to remember is there's no silver bullet around affordable housing. So all of these are just a combination of things that we can do to incentivize affordability. True affordability and affordable housing changes have to be met at the state level.
Right now, the state of Michigan does not actually allow local communities to put in place mandatory inclusionary zoning. So if cities wanted to put in an ordinance saying that a certain amount of homes need to actually be deemed affordable, the state is not going to allow that to be a mandatory ordinance. It can actually only be incentivized.
Simply adding new housing will not meet demands of very low-income populations in the city of Grand Rapids because you can't build housing without subsidies in a way that'll be affordable to them. If you're building a single-family home, you're probably spending $250,000 of that. That means you need an income of $4,500 a month to be able to afford that house. And there's no way the market can deliver a house for less than that if that's the cost of construction.
These market forces have reshaped the housing landscape in Grand Rapids. The question our community is faced with is how to move forward in light of increased demand and the constraints of state policy. Housing Now focuses on making it easier to build more types of houses in low-density residential districts, with most proposed changes happening within walking distance of business districts all across the city. These amendments speak to 4 major areas that we need your input on: turning existing homes into things like duplexes and fourplexes, incentives for developers adding extra units into their buildings, turning an attic, basement, or garage into a separate rental unit, and building row houses similar to these buildings that share a sidewall. These building types already exist in low-density residential districts, but have to go through a special land use approval process. Housing Now would change this process and in turn change the way residents shape the character of their neighborhoods. If you live in a neighborhood that looks like this, these decisions will affect who might be able to live on your block in this new Grand Rapids landscape.
I think it's so vital that we take a look at proposed solutions and we ask ourselves, who stands to benefit from this? Who might be left out of this solution? Who might be left behind? We need to have conversations like this as a community.
What did our neighborhoods look like? Why did they change? What were those policies change? Whose interests does it serve? What are we intending to do? What does the new future of the city look like? Grand Rapids is 45 square miles. That's a huge footprint. What is it that we want to accomplish?
It affects us, all of us, regardless of where you stand, regardless of where you live. It's really an opportunity for us to exercise our democratic values.
Tuesday, August 14th, Wednesday the 15th, Thursday the 16th, and Saturday, August 18th, we'll be hosting community listening sessions for residents to eat together and dig into these amendments. We're gathering your feedback to let the City Commission know what the community wants to move forward with. So please share this video with your neighbors, read up on the amendments here, and come out and have your voice heard this August.